You just need to get everything clean, and then you can start over, and then you're going to have the ability to keep up with these routines. It's never worked. I've been doing it for, decades.
Yeah.
It's never worked, but still I'm like, there is
Yes.
no other way. I just
Yep.
have to push. And then all of a sudden I'm like, this is ridiculous. What if I can't have a totally clean home? What if that's okay?
Welcome to the Minimal Mom Podcast. Today, Dawn is joined by Sarah McGlory. Sarah is a busy mom to 5 and small business owner, all while managing multiple autoimmune diseases. She understands the challenge of having more tasks than time and energy allow. As a result, she has created strategies to maximize her capabilities, which she shares through her adaptive cleaning system and online videos, advocating for those with chronic physical and mental health conditions.
Well, Sarah, I feel like we could just be such good friends. What you wrote here, I want to read this real quick because it just resonated with me so much. You said, I felt like a failure my whole adult life because my home was always a disaster. At a certain point, I realized I needed to stop comparing myself to the cleaning gurus I saw on social media. They had endless energy and perfect homes, and I had chronic pain and mismatched furniture. I decided to adapt to my time and energy needs rather than attempting to force myself to follow unrealistic expectations. I created a system called adaptive cleaning, enabling me to stay organized and not spend hours cleaning. Now I want to help lift the stress from your shoulders so you also have more time. That just resonated with me so much because that's why I found minimalism about 9 years ago, was because I felt like a loser. I felt like I wasn't doing anything right. I at least knew from my past experience that there was no cleaning routine or printable that was going to save me from myself. I just hadn't been able to stick with any of it. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and definitely more about your adaptive cleaning system.
Sure. Well, this has been a battle for me my whole life. I have not been able to stay on top of things. Sometimes people will say in the comments, well, I don't know how you do it with 5 kids. And I'm like, I was this way before I had kids. I was this way as a child. I was this way when I had my first apartment. I've always struggled to keep up with routines and to know how to manage the time and the energy that I
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
And I also find cleaning to be very boring.
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
have ADHD, so who wants
Yeah.
to do something
Didn't keep your
boring?
attention. Yeah.
No, it didn't at all. And so I found kind of a way to cobble through.
Hmm.
It was difficult, but I was kind of making it.
And did
And
you grow
then
up in a clean house or messy house?
I think that it was ordered chaos.
Okay.
My parents had us 5 kids. I was in ballet 6 days a week. My brothers were in baseball. So there was a lot of moving parts to our home. Um, and I definitely did not do a very good job of keeping my space orderly. I had a lot of, even then I had piles everywhere, and just I would be lost when they would say, go up and clean your room, and I would go up and I would look at everything same exact way I felt as an adult,
Hmm.
just where do I start? It doesn't, in my mind, it doesn't make sense, the steps of what
Okay.
to do.
Yeah.
And then I think also this is going to take hours, and I don't want to, and I don't have the resources to spend hours cleaning. So, yeah, it was just daunting then, and it's been daunting as an adult as well.
Mhm. And do you think, as you've worked with more women, I mean, I do think there is something about people that are just naturally wired to be tidy, to see a mess and systematically know how to tackle it, to desire to tackle it, that it does come more natural and easy. I feel like they're the ones that say, they would tell me, we'll just run the dishwasher every night. And I'm like, if it were that simple, I would run the dishwasher every night. Or they have
Yeah.
the cute sayings like, don't put it down, put it away. And that never, they make it look very easy. And I love them. They're great. But I don't think they quite always understand those of us who are like, I don't follow. That doesn't, I could
Yes,
do it for a night
exactly.
or two, but there's never, it never sticks. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think that there are a couple of groups of people. I think there are people who are wired that way. I think there are people who have been given a lot of expectations of keeping a clean home, and there's so much shame
Yes.
regarding not having a clean home, and they have the energy and the time to do it, so they can do it.
Okay.
Then there are the rest
Mhm.
of us who we don't have the energy and the time to push through. we don't have maybe the tools to kind of look at our home and figure out what to do next. But I have found a huge correlation between like how you physically and mentally are and your level of support with how easily you find home care tasks.
Oh,
So
interesting.
that's been my
Yeah, tell me a little
experience.
bit more about that idea. That's fascinating.
Well, for instance, there are people who, there's the traditional things like there are people who have house care help, people who will come in, mother in laws or mothers who will come over and help. There are, you know, people who just don't have a ton of extra things going on so they can focus a little bit more. Um, and then there are people who the amount of single parents out there or the amount of people with mental health issues
Yeah.
or physical health issues,
Yes.
and you finish working or doing what you need to do in a day, and what's left? Not
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
And no one's there to kind of, come help you or to support you. And
Yeah.
it becomes much more difficult for those of us in that situation. Mhm.
Yeah, and that's definitely where you found yourself. You've mentioned you have autoimmune disorders. And so, yeah, fast forward a little bit. So you have multiple kids, you have autoimmune and other energy limitations. So, how did you then have the wherewithal to develop this adaptive cleaning system? Like, how did it really come about?
It was not wherewithal, it was absolute desperation. It was, around March 2021. So we were in the process of adopting 3 children, including a baby who we'd brought home from the hospital. It was during the pandemic. I was homeschooling 2
Oh
of
my
my
goodness.
kids and that's not my forte.
Yeah.
My husband was working on a COVID unit. He's a nurse, and so he wasn't around a lot. I was working. I was trying to work, trying to start this business. And so I felt constantly like I was going to just burst into tears and I would never be able to get up. Like I was just holding myself together with band-aids everywhere. And then there was just this one night I had yelled at the kids about like socks. There were socks everywhere. They would, and it just, I couldn't. That was like my last straw. And I yelled, and then everybody just looked at me, and then I just started to cry.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Mom's okay. I get over it. But that night, I'm like, things are going to change. So I sit in bed and I get my notepad out and I've got my pen and I pull up like my favorite cleaning people on YouTube and I start binge watching cleaning episodes of like
Okay.
extreme clean your entire house, all day clean with me, that kind of thing. And I'm watching because, in my mind, I'm thinking, all you have to do is get to baseline. You just need to get everything clean, and then you can start over, and then you're going to have the ability to keep up with these routines. It's never worked. I've been doing it for, decades.
Yeah.
It's never worked, but still I'm like, there is
Yes.
no other way. I just
Yep.
have to like push
Yep.
harder.
Power
And
through.
so, yes, exactly. So I'm taking notes and then all of a sudden I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, but like what if I can't have a totally clean home? What if that's okay? What if I am not able to every day have a routine that looks the same? And then that started to resonate with me. It just like piqued my interest enough that I started just mulling it over in the background for a couple of weeks. And then that's how I started. I thought, well, instead of like this never ending list of things that I need to do in a day for my ideal self, let me make a list of things that I can actually get done
Yeah.
because I really like to cross things off. It
Yep.
makes me feel a sense of
Yes.
completion and pride. And so I'm like, let me just write things that I will absolutely do
Yeah.
every day, no matter
Okay.
what. And so that became, eventually that was my low capacity
Hmm.
task list.
Yeah.
So that's how it started.
So, what were the
With
types of things you would put on the list in the beginning?
At the very beginning, it was things like brush your teeth
Yeah.
because I had a newborn. Brush your teeth, change your under things, use paper plates. You're going to put all of the dishes in the dishwasher. at the end of the night. There were just very basic things. They had to get done, but it wasn't the extras. We had to have clean bottles, we had to have clean plates and things so that the next day we would all have utensils to eat
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
That was something that had to get done. I did not need to clean the baseboards. I did not need
Right.
to,
Yes, amen. Yeah.
dust necessarily.
Yeah.
I just needed to do. So that was how it started. And then once I started crossing those things off, I just felt like a huge weight come off of me. And then I added a couple more things. It kind of grew. And then I was like, okay, well, this is no longer low capacity. So I just transferred it to this other list. Okay, well, if I'm feeling a little bit better, I'll do these things. Much further down the road, I realized that I was having days where I was feeling pretty great. So
Yeah.
I could have a high capacity list because
Okay.
I need boundaries. Like
Uh-huh.
if I think to myself, I feel great, I'm going to do everything. What I will do is I'll
Yes.
try to clean the entire house. Then I'll also try to do some projects around the house and some decluttering. And then I wear myself out to
Yes.
exhaustion. Then I'm like a week exhausted, not doing anything. I'm back to low capacity. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be able to, as much as is in my control, make sure that I'm protecting my physicality and my mental health too, because there's nothing worse for me than trying to put too much pressure on myself.
Right.
And then that makes me, if I can't sustain that, then I want to avoid that failure drop, because it's not a failure. I just am not being realistic if I expect myself to do all these things.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think those with ADHD too, especially, you can get very like hyper focused on things,
Oh
and
yeah.
especially if you're having like wow, I feel great today. I'm gonna clean the whole fridge and the whole garage, and switch out all my kids' seasonal clothing and stuff. So I can definitely see where you have those parameters of like a high capacity day list, and I love the differentiation between like, yes, acknowledging some days I'm going to have like awesome energy levels, and then many days I am not, and that's actually okay. Like, but I still would like to get these things done. I think that's so good.
Yeah, because what I found was when I asked myself to do less, I found myself so much more productive,
Yes.
because I feel like, the guilt and shame about what you believe you're supposed to be doing is what causes a lot of overwhelm shutdown. And that was definitely my case. If I just freed myself up, like, I'm an adult, I get to decide what I'm going to do in a day.
Yeah.
And if I freed myself to do just a small amount of things, I would do those things consistently.
Yes.
Whereas if I had, my 50 item lists every day, I'm maybe doing one,
Yeah.
but probably not.
Yeah.
No.
No, that's so
And
good.
I'm going to feel terrible.
Right, exactly. Well, and Sarah, let's talk a little bit about the connection between our physical environment feeling overwhelmed and our mental space feeling kind of overwhelmed. Because I know when my kids were real little, it's kind of when hot mess mom culture was becoming a thing. It's like messy hair, don't care, or like Hobby Lobby started having the signs that are like, good moms have sticky floors and piles of laundry or whatever. And what was so hard, like, so I'm kind of trying to be like, we had 4 little kids, right? And I'm just kind of like, okay, like, this is just life. It's just going to be this hot mess, like chaos, for the next however many years. But it never felt right, because I'm like, if that's like okay and acceptable now and it just is what it is, like, why doesn't it feel better? And now we know there's more research between clutter and stress and different things. But it is so chicken and egg, because it's like, if I had the energy and wherewithal to get my house decluttered and simplified, then I would do that. Like, I know it would probably benefit my brain space. But yet when you're in it and you're so overwhelmed and you don't even know where to start, it's just like the thought of that is so daunting. So how do you help women through this like paralysis of like just even being able to get started?
Well, for me, I think that having a couple of routines first is very helpful. So with everything that I do, I have like I have lists and things that I have on my shop, but I also just talk about it a lot so that people can have access to it no matter what and start to think about, adapting it for their own needs. But, just having some options available to you for different tasks that have to get done will allow you to create a couple of routines. Because in my mind, you need to have some momentum. When
Yeah.
you're in the thick of it and you're completely overwhelmed, you don't have the energy to, cook a meal or clean the dishes. You're not going to have the mental space to think, oh, I can declutter or I can, do some deep cleaning. Those are just things that aren't typically accessible to you when you're in the thick of it. And when you've perpetuated this idea in your own mind that you're bad at cleaning and you don't know how to have routines and you just, lack proper motivation, which is a pet peeve of mine
Yeah.
that was a thing.
Yeah.
So if you can get into some routines, then that is kind of a snowball effect. Once you have those routines going, not a lot, just a couple of things, it tends to shift your viewpoint of yourself. You start
Yeah.
thinking, oh, well, okay, I'm actually doing some things here. And then that's opening possibilities for you. So then you can kind of think about your systems in general and how do I have too many things? Are they organized in a way that's functional? Just different things that can make a bigger environmental difference. But I think it starts very simply. I think you have to start with restoring confidence that
Yes.
you do know what to do. You can do it. You're just maybe going about it in an unrealistic way. You have these expectations that you should clean for 2 or 3 hours a day. I don't know anyone who does that, honestly, unless they do cleaning videos for a
Yeah.
living. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like these people with the systems and
Mhm.
the videos about extreme all day clean with me, that is literally their job.
Yeah.
And so, and you're
Mhm.
thinking, well, they just that's how
That's
they
what
live their
that they
life.
do. That's what all moms are doing out there, and I'm not, right?
No,
Well, and
yeah,
I
no.
love that about restoring your confidence because, I mean, especially when it comes to decluttering too, a lot of times we don't trust ourselves with making decisions if we don't feel like we're doing anything right. Then I'm like, well, I can't trust myself to make decisions because I'm going to get rid of something and then regret it. And then I'm going to beat myself
Mhm.
up saying, like, well, why did you get rid of that? Or there's also this uncertainty of, maybe once I get on top of my house again, maybe then I am going to do all the crafts and all the baking. And so then I'm going to need all of these things, right?
Yeah,
And I
for
mean,
sure.
like you and I know, like ain't no one got time for that either, right?
No.
Like there's probably never going to be a day where that's going to come.
Yeah.
But there is something about like getting a realistic view again of like, okay, how much time do I just need for doing these daily things, and how much energy do I have left over? And maybe I don't, and I don't have as much energy to do all the things I'd always hoped. But actually, that's okay because I am gaining confidence in myself. I'm following through with some of the commitments I'm making to myself, and now I can be more level-headed about some of those decisions.
Exactly. And your platform is about minimalism. That is something that I thought I would never be able to even touch because I just thought like I'm not the kind of person who can do that.
Hmm.
I like things.
Yeah,
But also there was a practical element to it. I'm like, there is no shot that I am going through this closet full of who knows what when I cannot consistently keep the kitchen clean or get the bathrooms cleaned. There's just no shot. But then once I started to, and you can see it because I've been making videos for a long time. You
yeah,
can see my house used to be very messy. And I would be cleaning, but there was still like a lot of stuff. So then I got to a point where I had enough bandwidth in my mind, how I viewed cleaning, how I viewed myself, that I could kind of look at decluttering and be like, well, maybe I can try. And I had a lot of hangups about decluttering. Like I have a lot of attachment to things and a lot of scarcity mindset, but I would just kind of, you know, I kind of brought the same energy to decluttering. I was
yeah,
like, I don't have to declutter this entire closet.
yeah,
I can take like 3 things out that I know for sure that I'm not going to use. They're broken or whatever. that kind of opened up a whole new window to me because I could not believe how much better I felt when I didn't have so many things everywhere. It's the visual clutter, but it's also like I had this realization that it doesn't matter if I'm not using it. I am still taking care of it.
Yes.
It still
Yes.
has to be dusted.
Yep.
It's still a space that's taking up room where something else could go that, there's just so much energy that goes into these things that you don't even use.
Right? You're still feeling guilty when you realize you haven't used it. You're like, "Oh, why did I buy that? Why did I take that? Why?" Oh, the worst is when you, like, go to switch out kids' clothes and you're like, "Oh, they grew out of that before, they're too big to wear this cute outfit I got and put away." And that's why I love the idea of looking at it all as inventory that we have to manage.
I
And
like that word.
there's
Mhm.
something so, like, wise and sobering when we just recognize, like, how much inventory can I actually manage in this season of life that I'm in?
Yeah.
And especially if I have autoimmune and, 5 kids, 3 I just adopted. Oh my goodness, right? Running
Yeah.
a business, like husband's at the hospital, like, it's like you were in a very like a state that where you should have been managing the most minimal inventory ever, right? But no one had
Right.
taught you that or given you permission to say
No.
like,
Mm-mm.
"Hey, we're like in survival mode here. You need to be like have the least amount of things as physically possible," but we don't think about it that way. None of us have ever been taught that. And so we can though discover it now as we go and give ourselves permission to say like, "Oh yeah, you know what? I don't have the energy to manage all of these things." And even if it is in storage, it is still on my mental to-do list of things I have to remember and manage and keep dry and safe and not let pests get to and all of that kind of thing. Mhm.
Yeah. I think it's funny too because I had such a rebellion in my mind against both like having a clean house and decluttering
Yeah.
because I just couldn't do it. So I was like, well, that's for those people.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
am not those people.
Mhm.
But it's just interesting how, if you do open yourself up to a little curiosity about what's
Yeah.
going on with yourself and cater to yourself, a lot of things open up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. I've actually felt the same way, like, about a lot of other, like, minimalists and stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, I still like color, and I'm, like, I still wanna have personality and whatever,"
Yeah.
But so for a while, I, like, kept my distance from all the others. I'm like, "I'm not
Yeah.
like you," and then I'm like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, we have a lot in common, and it's fine, and it's beautiful as we get our
Yeah.
houses decluttered and simplified," but I
Yeah.
totally hear you. So but we can be rebellious and still have homes that again aren't perfect. And again, that's never been my goal either. It was more that I just wanted to feel like I could come home and let my guard down and not always feel like I'm on edge or have that, like you said, that just like buzz of like, there's so much to do and I'm so behind on everything. So how would you describe your home now that you've gotten these systems in place?
I would say that still I have work to do. I think that with the level of time and I mean my physicality, there are days when I'm pretty good, um, physically speaking, but there are a lot of days when I'm not. So I have really had to adjust my expectations and also with time. Like I'm doing a lot of things. And if I have a 1 hour window after the kids have gone to bed, you better believe I'm not going to do it, spend that time cleaning the whole time. Like, no. So I've had to really adjust my expectations. And then I realized at a certain point, I'm like, this is not a season for me where my house is going to be immaculate.
Yeah.
It's not. If my house was immaculate, it would require me to be moving at all times with that as my main goal, just trying to keep, because I have a 3-year-old. She is a wild tornado of a person. And she delights in uncleaning the things that I've cleaned. But I don't want, I neither have the time or energy, nor do I want to do those things. But what I do have is systems. And that has made a really big difference for me because if I know that there's a certain way I'm going to approach my house maintenance cleaning wise, there's a certain way I'm going to approach it. I have like time that I will declutter every month. And then I have, just deep cleaning things that I'll do. And it's all at different levels. Like I have a task for piles because I make intentional piles. This is part of what I do because it helps me with ADHD to remove visual clutter and then kind of see what needs to be done.
Okay.
But so I have a task for piles. That could be mail, that could be, the baskets that I have places, whatever. And I will just, if I'm at low capacity, I don't need to clear out this whole basket. That's no longer my aim. I no longer have this like perfectionist mindset
Yeah.
because it's not realistic for me. And it's taken a long time to get there, but it's been hugely freeing. But I can spend 10 or 15 minutes on this little pile.
Yeah.
And then once you do things like that, you give yourself the freedom to just do what you have access to doing. Then all of a sudden you're seeing like differences everywhere and you're like breathing better in your own home. I used to feel like I was drowning in my home all the time. So I would say that my house is, I think that's much tidier. I think I still have a ways to go with decluttering because I've just been kind of gently letting myself declutter and not making a thing about it. I think that that's going to help me.
Yeah.
And it's clean, you know.
Yeah. That's awesome.
It's pretty clean
Yeah.
unless the child has just wiped their handprints, and I'll probably get to that next week.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's speak to perfectionism for a minute too. It's that
Mhm.
hasn't been something I've struggled with personally, but I know many who are listening do. Whether it's because like my mom grew up in a home where it did have to be perfectly clean,
Yeah.
and she was like, even if we were just leaving the house to go to the mailbox, like everything had to be swept and put away, and so she kind of brought that then into managing her home, and she did it for a while until life just got so overwhelming. But she always had that nagging in the back of her head then of like, well,
Mhm.
you're not doing it right. And this is how it
Right.
should be done. So, how do you help women overcome that?
Well, first of all, I try to normalize my home. I will show my home. I don't ever stage it. I don't ever, narrow the focus in on the one clean area. I really try to just show what it looks like because a huge part of the problem for me when I was looking at social media for inspiration, I was only seeing beautiful homes that were perfectly put together and perfectly clean, at least, the section they were showing me.
Yeah.
And so I think that we have a responsibility if we're going to make content. You don't have to bear everything, but be more realistic and vulnerable about what you're showing. So that's something that's very important to me. I knew as soon as I started making social media content that it was going to reflect my reality in as much as I could
Yeah.
reflect it. And I like to talk about perfectionism because I think I didn't realize that I was a perfectionist because I think there's a spectrum of how you handle that feeling in you that
Okay.
everything has to be perfect. So there's the spectrum that becomes obsessive. They have to do it over and over. They have to make sure that every little thing is done before they get in bed. That is how they cope with that feeling of shame or guilt. And then there are the people, which I did do a lot when I was younger, and then my energy started to flag, and then I couldn't. And then there's those of us who just were so worn out, like we could not come up with the energy needed to do all these things, so we do nothing.
Yes. Like it renders you inactive then, because if I can't do it perfectly, then
Mhm.
why even?
Why
Yeah.
start it?
Yeah.
And that was very shocking to me, and I think it's shocking to a lot of people that if you're not doing anything, that doesn't mean you're a slob. It tends to mean that you feel that you're waiting
Yeah.
until you have the energy and the
Yes.
time and the motivation to get it all done. So I talk ad nauseum. This is one of my biggest things about just starting. Like, set a timer, put on a show, have a playlist or a podcast, and you decide because you're the adult, you know what you have access to, and you decide how long you want to spend cleaning. But then when that time limit is over, you stop. It's
Yes.
an exercise. It's a
Yeah.
frustrating exercise for people who really have all or nothing
Yes.
thought patterns,
Yeah.
but it's a muscle. And as you keep using that muscle, then they do see themselves, oh, I'm actually getting up and doing more.
Yes.
Whereas
Right. Yeah.
yesterday, I barely got up to do anything because I was so exhausted and I just knew that I couldn't do XYZ. Well, you just got up and you did this one thing and it made a difference. And then it's so interesting how we are visually because I can do like a small thing And the rest of my house still needs a lot of work, but as I'm passing the small thing that I did, I'm noticing it. It's
Yes,
giving me satisfaction. I'm feeling
absolutely.
like a breath of
Look what
fresh
I did.
air.
Yeah.
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 And so then I think people start to develop this like, oh, okay, well, this is a more logical approach. We don't actually have to think that, I am responsible for doing all of these things.
Yes.
And if they try it, you have to try it. You have to be willing to try. But I mean, that's like probably the number one comment that I get is that people will say that you breaking down these tasks or showing like how you do just this amount of time and then stop. It I have implemented this and it works.
That's
Like,
so
yeah.
funny because that is like we have a mantra in our membership group that 5 minutes matters. And that is probably the number one thing people say to me about the group is they're like, you're right. It really does matter. And whether it's tidying up the kitchen, doing dishes, or even a small decluttering project, it's like just enough to switch your brain from I don't want to do this. I don't have energy. I don't feel like it to like, oh, well, maybe I could just do a little more as long as I'm already doing it. Right. And then again, like we talked about building confidence in yourself and like, oh, I guess I can follow through with some of the things I like
Yeah.
say that I'm going to do.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's so cool.
It is, and it transfers you out of your brain, which is like dreading, and I don't think I can, and do I, and what should I start? And
And
then it
building it up to
transfers
be
you.
so big, like it's
Yes.
so hard. That's why all that's piled there because I don't know what to do with it. Like,
Yes.
yeah.
But then it puts you back in your body. Like that's for me, I can get very anxious. I am a very locked into my head kind of person.
Okay.
I'm an Enneagram 5.
Okay.
So I just sit here in my brain all the time. And then that can create some cool things, but it can also create some anxiety. And I've noticed like the number one way to ease my anxiety is to do an action step.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a long action step. It could be something so simple, but it changes the power dynamic from like dread to, oh, I'm actually in control of this. I can actually, I'm not a helpless person in this scenario.
Yeah. No, I think that's so good. And there is something about bringing our physical environment into order. Again, not perfectly clean, but even just like picking some things up that I believe helps us to feel, like you said, like more in control, even of things like that technically we have no control over, but we start to feel like more optimistic, like, well, it might work out actually in my favor. It might not be so bad as what I'm imagining. And so it's really powerful. Just yeah, just doing a little bit of anything really. And a lot of days it doesn't actually matter what it is. It's just literally that action to get going again.
Yeah,
That is so
exactly.
good. Well, Sarah, so awesome to get to visit with you today. I know
Yeah.
everyone listening is going to want to follow you and find out more. So, what's the best place? Where are your best resources and best place to spend time with you?
I am actually on all social media platforms, so you can find me pretty much anywhere. I'm on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. And I have a website, which is probably will be in the show notes, but you can come there too to see. I have a couple of little freebie things that you can take if you want to just try it out for yourself. And yeah, and just come hang out with me because we're gonna do things in a very realistic way
Yes,
if you
amen.
if you
Yeah.
want to.
Yes. No, I think your approach sounds wonderful. I think all of us are kind of exhausted by the unrealistic like
Yeah.
things out there. So that's so
Yeah.
cool.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're looking for more support, be sure to check out The Minimal Mom on YouTube too. And we'll see you next time.